And welcome back to the Eau Rouge podcast with Chris and James. Today we're talking about Haas. And well, Chris, there wasn't really much to discuss in terms of the actual car because they didn't release the car. It was just new colours on the old car from last year. But I think, to be fair, the livery actually gives us quite a lot to talk about in itself, because it is the mix of the Russian flag with, the previous colours of Haas from previous years. I don't know what to make of it, to be honest.
I mean, the colour scheme is fine. Is it probably technically illegal? Yes. The Haas said they've got permission from the FIA to be able to use those colours because all Russian sporting colours are banned in all forms of international sport as a result of their IOC exclusion in the wake of the 2018 Winter Olympics. But yeah, it's a talking point. And the talking point, I think, is Haas are about to enter their last season before they get bought out to Eurochem.
It's a really bizarre mix, isn't it? Where we've got Haas that are being funded by this Russian company. You would never have thought that Russia and the USA would be working together on something, but actually maybe it's not the case that they're working together. It's simply that Russia is taking over.
Yes, no, I think their refusal to drop Mazepin over the summer becomes explainable when you look at the fact the car has something like 4 sponsors on it and almost all of them are Eurochem. So, it's pretty clear that Haas was going to get sold. So they found somebody willing to pay a lot of money. And I don't know how much he's paying. I've heard reportedly as much as 50% of the budget. But he must be one of the highest paying pay drivers in F1 history.
That's a shame, really, isn't it? Because Haas coming into the sport when they did, they were both praised and criticized for their approach, because essentially what they did is they bought every part that they were legally allowed to buy, and they built everything that they were told they must build. I actually thought that was quite a smart approach when entering, in the circumstances that Haas had in entering the sport. But the whole point is that you would eventually transition into a works team, maybe not, maybe that's going too far, but eventually you would transition into a self-sufficient team to an extent. But actually now this is a case of them transitioning themselves out of the sport.
Yeah, it's been difficult. And I think if you're funding an operation like this, you do need to not be dead last. Yeah, I think Haas, and I suspect we'll see tomorrow with Williams, are likely to unveil the fact that a couple of years of miserable results have resulted in severe financial hardship. I don't expect Williams to be as dramatically bought out and mainstream as the Haas, but I do think there's an element of that with Dorilton Capital taking over. So yeah, it's sad, really, and I think it underlines the expense of competing in F1 and why we have so few teams. Because I can't imagine Gene Haas actually wanted what amounts to an emasculating sponsorship deal for a team that brands itself as being America's F1 team. So where do they go? I think Haas goes out the sport and Eurochem comes in.
I suppose in that sense, at least we're not losing a team, just that transition. But I think that it's unfortunate that they couldn't sustain that level of. I mean, when they came into sport in the first year or two, they had some decent results, and the Haas looked all right, and it really did look like they had a decent foundation to build upon. And things have just gone downhill from there. They've just not really improved at all, and that's where they are. But is there maybe a ray of hope this season for them with the arrival of Mick Schumacher?
Difficult to say. Now, it's already one of the oldest cliches in racing, and he's only just entered F1. But he's not a driver that adapts quickly to new series. He came 12th in his first series of Formula 3, and he came 12th in his first series of Formula 2. Are we going to see him set the world on fire? Not at the beginning, and certainly not in a Haas.
Well, maybe this actually then is the perfect season for him, because he's going to have a huge weight on his shoulders, isn't he, throughout his career to live up in any way to his father. And it's a very different scenario to what other drivers like Damon Hill, and Rosberg and Verstappen had. Damon Hill maybe a little bit less so because his father was very greatly revered, but still, Mick Schumacher's living up to almost up until recently, the most successful Formula One driver ever, the most revered driver ever, potentially as well, maybe other than Ayrton Senna. And but actually what he's got now is a season where he's in a car that's not expected to do that much, and he's got time to adjust, which we know, and we know it takes him a bit of time.
Yes, yeah, but the problem is, as you say, because of who his father is, he's still got to deliver. If he was coming through as a Ferrari Academy driver, he might get a couple of years in the Haas. And I do actually think I should point out, I think he is coming in as a Ferrari Academy driver. I think Haas need the name recognition, but they also need to do Ferrari the favour. And I imagine receive some sort of compensation in terms of reduced engine costs in exchange for giving Schumacher the experience that he needs. So he's got time in that he's there to develop on purpose, but I think he's got less time given that everyone expects him to do exactly what his father did in Belgium in 1991.
So then are we expecting his trajectory to be Haas straight into the Ferrari seat, maybe in a few years' time? Because obviously we would presume that the Ferrari seats are going to be taken for a few years yet. Or is this a case of this is his first stepping stone and he's going to move somewhere else next? I mean, we saw, I'm comparing him to his father here, and this is truly unfair, I think. But obviously, Michael Schumacher started at Jordan, was his first step. Then he went into the Benetton and then to Ferrari. Are we expecting like there's going to be a team in the middle between Haas and Ferrari, or is there going to be that straight jump?
I think there'll be the straight jump. I think Michael Schumacher was making the name and actually went to a top team in Benetton. If Mick's unsuccessful, I don't think he'll make that Ferrari step. I think he'll end up comfortably sitting in another car from a team that wants to be able to bank on the brand recognition of a Schumacher name in their car. But I think equally, if he does well, he'll just go straight to Ferrari. That's clearly the plan that everybody at Ferrari genuinely wants to see. And I think that is what they're going to attempt to do if they possibly can. But it's entirely dependent on how he performs. If he has a poor couple of first seasons and a middling third, then he's going to end up as someone like Alpine, surely.
So would they not invest in him anyway? If he's not had a very successful time at Haas, you don't think that they would pick him up and be like, okay, right, we're gonna nurture you. We're gonna turn you into a Ferrari driver. But Ferrari don't necessarily have a history of doing that.
No, they don't. And I don't think they have the resources to do that really at the moment. I think they're in a huge process of rebuilding. And for all the exciting talk that, will Vettel succeed at Aston Martin, you can't actually overlook that this is probably a move up the grid from Ferrari for Vettel. So I think Ferrari have got so many problems in their own house that Schumacher's going to be expected to deliver them with hype and excitement. You can have a good season in a bad car. Look at Bianchi in the Marussia, for example, or Vettel and the Toro Rosso, maybe not quite a case of that. George Russell in the Williams is another one. You can show you are a talent of the future and not need to take every race in your first season. So I think they will be looking for promising performances across the board. But I can't honestly say I even expect Schumacher to be the rookie of the year. I think that Tsunoda is going to end up being the best new driver. But
interesting.
He's got to deliver because he's in the Red Bull Junior program.
So what's a good season for Schumacher then? Where would we be expecting him to finish, and where would be finishing above expectations?
We expect him to finish 18th, realistically, I think. You expect him to be ahead of Latifi, and you expect him to be ahead of Mazepin. So I think that anything above 18th is a good result, unless the Ferrari engine is radically better than last season, which I know Ferrari are promising, but I don't know how much I actually trust.
And how much of this is just nostalgia for everybody? Because I mean, we grew up watching Schumacher. he was the dominant driver of the era that we were watching. Most of the time we wanted him to lose, or I know I certainly did, whoever he was against. And the dominance of that too. I remember in 2004 watching that season and just being like, when will this end? When is somebody going to come along and knock Schumacher off? And then of course Alonso and Renault did the next year. But this is the first real father-son duo that we, as this generation of Formula One fans, have actually witnessed fully. You know, we were too young to remember Rosberg, and obviously far too young to remember Graham Hill. Verstappen, I do remember, but like you said, Verstappen was distinctly average. So this is the first real father-son duo that we properly remember. How nostalgic is that going to be for us? Is that going to be really fun to watch?
Well, I think it will be, to a degree. I think, as you can guarantee that you will hear Crofty yell, "Sir Lewis Hamilton!" every single time Hamilton takes the lead. I think that you're going to hear a lot of talk about the son of 7-time Formula One great Michael Schumacher, and all the articles are going to write themselves. It's just going to be lazy comparisons to Schumacher. So I think there is nostalgia there, of course, but it's also, I think, like Bruno Senna, a little bit of a cynical use by some parties of a famous name.
So we've talked about Schumacher then, and now it's time to talk about Mazepin. And you've been looking forward to this for a long time, Chris. Now, we were talking about this before we were doing the podcast, and you were asking whether how cruel and harsh can you be for Mazepin? Well, how do we want to approach us actually talking about him? And I suggested that maybe I would try and be the more balanced approach, and you would just go to town on him. So what I'm going to do is just sit back for the next 5 minutes and let you take it away, and I'll try and provide some balance at the end of it.
Well then, there's a lot of things you can say about Nikita Mazepin. You could look at his horrendously distasteful live stream of sexual assault earlier in the year. You could look at him punching other drivers in the face. You could look at him forcing drivers off the track and dangerously close to walls at high speeds. You could look at the fact that while people accuse Lance Stroll of just being there for daddy's money, Nikita Mazepin embodies everything about that philosophy. But I don't think I bother to point out any of those. I would point out that since he began his first part-time season of racing, Nikita Mazepin has only won 8 races in 7 years. 8 races, 2 pole positions, and 8 fastest laps. He's coming to Formula One to take up a seat a Formula One driver could use, and he has done virtually nothing. He won two of those 8 race wins came last season with a sprinkling of podiums, but his first season with Art was abysmal. He failed to win GP3. He did come second, but he didn't win GP3, and he did nothing in FIA Formula 3. So what does he bring apart from the fact that he's effectively just bought himself a team? He brings nothing to the sport. There is no reason for them to be there. The fact that Haas has had to take his money in order to stay afloat is more of an indictment of Formula One than it is of Gene Haas. And I think we're just going to watch him battling Latifi for last place and doing some truly abhorrent dickhead shit off of the track.
I don't know how to defend him at this moment. Everything you've said, I agree with. I mean, imagine let's forget everything that's gone before in the previous formulas, and let's take his first season in F1. He's a young driver coming into the sport. Imagine starting off your Formula One career by groping someone. That's how you're going to be known when you enter the sport. That's what you've got. That's what you've got next to your name from that, regardless of all of the other not so good the black marks against your performances and other actions that maybe you've done over the years. Maybe you could argue he's got a bit of spice about him, which would make it more interesting this year in Formula One. The look you just
You
gave me.
could argue that, but
The
it would be
viewers
a
can't.
disingenuous argument.
The viewers can't see your face. Maybe make sure you put your face into this podcast, because the look you just gave me was one like, why did I decide to do a podcast with this man? Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Is it? Why is he? He is the definition of the paid driver, and the problem is now that, as we were talking about the fact that Haas are transitioning into this Russian team, that means that Mazepin is going to be in the sport for quite some time, don't you think?
Yeah, I think
Unless he gets
Mazepin is
kicked
here
out.
for as long as he wants to be.
Unless he gets kicked out.
I think if he gets kicked out, he'll buy a team in at this point. I think F1 needs more teams, and Mazepin needs something to do with all those billions of bloody oil rubles that he's got. So what he'll do is buy himself a team. I think, short of the FIA stepping in and banning him completely, which would take something like really intense. Yeah, I think he's here for the foreseeable future. Maybe he gets bored. Maybe he's just abjectly terrible. We'll see. One of the things that really concerns me about Mazepin's driving is he hardly has any race retirements, which says to me he's not actually going fast enough most of the time to crash.
Or wear out any parts of the car.
Yes, yeah. This is going to be really embarrassing if he has a better season than Schumacher, but I very much doubt it.
Okay, well then let's talk about our predictions. So Haas last year finished 9th, second from last in the Constructors' Championship with a mere 3 points. And Grosjean was 19th with 2 points. Magnussen was 20th with 1. Where do you expect Haas to finish this year?
Not very high, if I'm being completely honest. I don't think that anyone's going to see a 5th place again for Haas this year. The question is, how much of Williams improved and how much of Alpha slipped? I think Haas themselves will actually come dead last. I think it will be the thing that pushes Gene to sell to Dimitri Mazepin. I think Mazepin, I actually have Mazepin to come dead last in my standings. I wonder how much is a product of my very low regard for the man and how much is a product of my very low regard for the man's racing. But he is 20th. Schumacher, I have at 18th, doing the bare minimum. What's absolutely the least expected of him?
Well, for the second time in a row, you have matched my prediction exactly the same. I think Williams are going to have a better season simply because of George Russell is what I'm going with, not necessarily because their car's going to be much better, but maybe it will be. So yeah, I think Haas will come last, and like you said, that will be the catalyst for the change of hands at the end of the season. Mazepin also in 20th place, and I do think that Schumacher is going to do better than Latifi, and in which case, yes, I think Schumacher to come 18th, and then and Mazepin last.
Well, I suppose only time will prove us right. We are rapidly coming up on the start of the season now. We're starting coming up on the launch of Drive to Survive Season 3, which will at least give us something to do for the week before testing. So all will be revealed in due course.
Excellent, and we're really looking forward to it. So tomorrow, join us for the Williams launch. Again, a team that we're not expecting to do particularly well, but it is going to be really interesting to talk about George Russell. I think that's what we're most excited to be mentioning. And obviously, Williams has kind of changed hands as well. So yes, join us tomorrow for that. Please make sure you hit like, subscribe, comment, tell us what you think Haas are going to do this year. We are particularly interested in your comments on Mazepin and your thoughts about that. And thank you so much for listening. We will see you tomorrow.